You're embarrassing the family with your little hobby business." Those words hit me like ice water as my brother's fiancée smiled sweetly across the brunch table, her diamond ring catching the Austin sunlight. What Rebecca Sterling didn't know was that her phone was about to ring with an offer that would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Hi, I'm Sarah Mitchell, 32 years old, single mother to an incredible 8-year-old named Tommy, and according to my family, the official disappointment of the Mitchell clan. For the past 18 months, I've been pouring my heart and soul into SustainTech Solutions, an app that helps families reduce waste and live more sustainably. While my brother Jake climbs the corporate ladder at Dell Technologies and his fiancée Rebecca bills 6 figures as a corporate lawyer, I've been scraping by in a cramped East Austin apartment, coding late into the night and living off ramen, noodles, and determination. The smell of breakfast tacos and fresh coffee used to comfort me during those early morning coding sessions at Radio Coffee on Barton Springs Road. Austin's tech scene buzzed around me, but I felt like I was on the outside looking in. Most days, I worked from a corner table, Tommy doing homework beside me while I debugged code and answered customer service emails. My laptop was held together with electrical tape, and my business cards were printed at FedEx office because I couldn't afford a proper printing service. But none of that mattered because I believed in what I was building. Tommy never complained when we had cereal for dinner again, or when I had to say no to the expensive summer camps his friends attended. He'd sit next to me, drawing pictures of rockets and planets, completely absorbed in his own creative world. Sometimes he'd look up and ask if we were poor, and I'd tell him we were rich in dreams. He'd nod seriously, like that made perfect sense, and go back to his drawings. Those moments kept me going when the bank account hit double digits and the rejection emails from investors piled up. My parents, Linda and Robert Mitchell, owned a successful contracting business in Terrytown. Dad built custom houses for Austin's tech elite, and Mom managed the books with military precision. They'd worked hard for their success, which made my decision to leave my stable marketing job at a Fortune 500 company seem reckless and selfish to them. Every family gathering became an opportunity for them to ask when I was going to get serious and find a real job again. They spoke about my business like it was an expensive hobby, something I'd eventually outgrow once reality set in. Jake, my younger brother by 3 years, had always been the golden child. Star athlete in high school, business degree from UT, steady progression up the corporate ladder. He met Rebecca at a networking event 2 years ago, and she fit perfectly into the life my family envisioned for successful people. She drove a white BMW, lived in a West Lake Hills condo with granite countertops and a wine fridge, and spoke fluently about stock options and retirement planning. When Jake proposed last Christmas, Rebecca immediately started planning a wedding that would cost more than I'd made in the past 2 years. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was building technology to help people live more consciously while my own family valued appearance and traditional success above everything else. My app tracked household waste, suggested alternatives to single-use items, and connected users with local sustainable businesses. It had a small but passionate user base, mostly young families and environmentally conscious millennials who left glowing 5-star reviews about how it had changed their daily habits. But passionate users don't pay rent, and 5-star reviews don't buy groceries. Working from the Capital Factory co-working space downtown gave me access to Austin's startup community, but it also highlighted how far behind I was compared to companies with actual funding. I'd sit in on pitch competitions and networking events, watching polished entrepreneurs present to rooms full of investors while I took notes and dreamed of having that kind of backing. My business partner, Emma Rodriguez, handled our app development with incredible skill, but she was freelancing for other companies to pay her bills while we waited for SustainTech to generate real revenue. The pressure intensified as Jake and Rebecca's engagement stretched on. Every family dinner became a showcase for their achievements, their vacation photos from Cabo, their new furniture purchases, their discussions about buying a house together. Meanwhile, I'd show up with Tommy and a grocery store bouquet for Mom, trying to deflect questions about my love life and financial situation. Rebecca had a way of asking seemingly innocent questions that highlighted exactly how different my life was from theirs. She'd wonder aloud how I managed to balance work and motherhood, then immediately follow up with stories about her own demanding career, making it clear she couldn't imagine choosing anything that required such sacrifice. Tommy adored his Uncle Jake, who always made time to throw a football in the backyard and ask about school projects. But Rebecca barely acknowledged Tommy's existence, treating him like background noise during family gatherings. She'd smile politely when he showed her his latest artwork, then immediately turn to the adults for real conversation. I watched my son's face fall slightly each time, though he never complained. He was used to adults dismissing him, unfortunately. The breaking point had been building for months. Rebecca's casual comments about my situation became more frequent and pointed. She'd suggest networking events I should attend to meet serious business people, or mention job openings at her law firm for administrative positions. The subtext was always clear. It was time for me to give up this entrepreneurial fantasy and get back to being a responsible adult. She positioned herself as someone trying to help, which made her condescension even more frustrating. Austin's tech community can be surprisingly small, especially when you're trying to make connections and find investors. I'd been pitching SustainTech to anyone who would listen, attending meetups and demo days, entering every startup competition I could find. The feedback was consistently positive about the product itself, but investors wanted to see more traction, more revenue, more proof that this wasn't just another feel-good app that would disappear in 6 months. I understood their skepticism, but it stung every time someone praised the concept and then passed on the opportunity to invest. The financial stress was constant and exhausting. Some months I had to choose between paying for Tommy's after-school program or keeping the lights on. I'd learned to shop the clearance sections first, to plan meals around whatever was on sale, to fix everything myself instead of calling for help. My parents offered to help occasionally, but it always came with lectures about financial responsibility and suggestions that I consider moving back home with Tommy. The thought of admitting defeat and returning to my childhood bedroom at 32 felt like giving up on everything I'd worked toward. Emma kept our app running and improving despite my inability to pay her consistently. She believed in the mission as much as I did, and she'd seen how users responded to our platform. We had families documenting 50% reductions in household waste. Local businesses reporting increased foot traffic from our recommendations, and schools using our educational components in their environmental programs. The impact was real and measurable, but impact doesn't pay developer salaries or server costs. Late at night, after Tommy went to bed, I'd sit with my laptop and work on investor presentations, refining pitch decks and financial projections that never seemed impressive enough. I'd research venture capital firms and angel investors, trying to find someone who shared our vision for sustainable living technology. Austin had plenty of investment money flowing through it, but most of it went to flashier startups with aggressive growth models and founders who fit a certain profile. A single mom building an environmental app from her apartment didn't exactly scream disruptive unicorn startup. The invitation to Sunday brunch at the Grove should have been a pleasant family gathering. Rebecca had suggested it as a way to celebrate Jake's recent promotion to senior marketing manager, and Mom immediately declared it a mandatory family event. The Grove was exactly the kind of place Rebecca loved, with white tablecloths, bottomless mimosas, and prices that made me wince when I looked at the menu. I'd budgeted carefully to afford Tommy's kids' meal and my own modest breakfast, hoping the conversation would stay light and celebratory. Tommy wore his best polo shirt and khakis, excited to spend time with his uncle and grandparents. He'd been working on a project about recycling for school and wanted to tell everyone about what he'd learned. his enthusiasm for environmental topics always made me proud, even when I worried that other kids might think he was weird for caring so much about composting and energy conservation. He represented everything I hoped SustainTech could inspire in the next generation. The restaurant buzzed with typical Austin Sunday energy. Families gathering over elaborate breakfast spreads while children played on phones and adults discussed weekend plans. Our table overlooked the hill country landscape through floor-to-ceiling windows, and Rebecca made sure to comment on how lovely the view was from her side of the table. She'd chosen her seat strategically, positioning herself where the natural light would be most flattering for the inevitable Instagram photos. What I didn't know as we settled in for what I thought would be just another uncomfortable family meal was that my phone, sitting silently in my purse, held an email that would change everything. Michael Chen, a partner at Austin Ventures, had been using SustainTech Solutions for the past 6 months without my knowledge. His family had reduced their household waste by 60%, saved hundreds of dollars on unnecessary purchases, and discovered local businesses they never knew existed. He'd been impressed enough to start researching our company, and that morning, he decided to reach out about a potential investment opportunity. But first, I had to survive brunch with my family, where Rebecca Sterling was about to remind everyone exactly what she thought of my life choices. The Sunday morning routine had become a ritual of quiet desperation. While other families in my East Austin neighborhood slept in or enjoyed leisurely pancake breakfasts, I was already at my laptop by 6 a.m., checking overnight user feedback and responding to customer support emails before Tommy woke up. SustainTech Solutions never slept, and neither did its founder, apparently. My apartment felt smaller every day, cluttered with the debris of entrepreneurial ambition. Stacks of business books from the library covered the coffee table, their spines promising secrets to startup success that somehow never quite translated to my reality. Legal documents for my LLC were paper-clipped to unpaid invoices, and my dining table doubled as a conference room for video calls with potential partners. Tommy had learned to tiptoe around my work spread, careful not to disturb the ecosystem of dreams and desperation that had colonized our living space. The numbers told a story I didn't want to acknowledge. After 18 months of 16-hour days, SustainTech had generated exactly $4,732 in revenue. Our user base was growing steadily, but slowly, and most of our downloads came from free promotional periods that ate into already razor-thin margins. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Emma Rodriguez, my development partner, deserved far more than the sporadic payments I could manage. She'd become more than a business partner. She was a lifeline, the only person who truly understood the technical challenges we faced, while everyone else offered unsolicited advice about marketing and business strategy. Tommy's school morning routine provided the only predictable structure in our chaotic schedule. He'd eat his cereal while I packed his lunch, both of us moving through our tasks with the efficiency of a well-rehearsed dance. He never asked why. His lunchbox contained generic granola bars while his classmates had name-brand snacks, or why his backpack came from a thrift store while theirs bore designer logos. At 8 years old, he possessed an emotional intelligence that sometimes left me breathless with gratitude and guilt in equal measure. The commute to Zilker Elementary took us through neighborhoods that showcased Austin's economic divide with startling clarity. We'd pass million-dollar homes with perfect lawns and luxury cars and driveways, then turn onto streets lined with aging apartments and corner stores advertising check-cashing services. Tommy would press his face to the window, narrating the scenery with the enthusiasm of a tour guide, completely oblivious to the social stratification that defined our route. Mrs. Patterson, Tommy's third-grade teacher, had become an unexpected ally in our unconventional journey. She understood that some parents couldn't volunteer for field trips or contribute expensive supplies to classroom projects, and she made sure Tommy never felt excluded from activities because of our financial limitations. during parent-teacher conferences. She'd praise his creativity and environmental consciousness, mentioning how he'd convinced several classmates to start composting programs at home. Those conversations reminded me that I was raising something more valuable than a successful business, a thoughtful human being. The co-working space at Capital Factory buzzed with the energy of ambition and caffeine, a modern cathedral where entrepreneurs worshipped at the altar of disruption and growth metrics. I'd arrive each morning with my battered laptop and a thermos of coffee from home, trying to blend in among the polo-shirted founders who discussed million-dollar valuations with casual confidence. The monthly membership fee stretched my budget to its breaking point, but access to reliable internet and a professional environment felt essential for maintaining any credibility in Austin's competitive startup scene. Emma would meet me there twice a week, her laptop bag stuffed with energy bars and the latest technical manuals. She had a gift for explaining complex coding concepts in terms I could understand, and she never made me feel stupid for asking basic questions about algorithms and user interface design. While I handled the business development and marketing aspects of SustainTech, she managed the technical architecture that kept our app functioning smoothly across different devices and operating systems. Our user reviews became a source of both pride and frustration. Families wrote detailed testimonials about how SustainTech had transformed their daily routines, helping them discover bulk stores, farmers markets, and repair services they'd never known existed. Parents shared photos of their children's school projects inspired by our educational content, and small business owners thanked us for connecting them with environmentally conscious customers. The emotional impact was undeniable, but emotional impact didn't translate to revenue streams that could sustain a growing company. The financial tightrope I walked daily required constant recalculation and adjustment. Grocery shopping became a mathematical exercise in maximizing nutrition while minimizing cost. I'd spend hours comparing unit prices and planning meals around whatever proteins were discounted that week. Tommy learned to appreciate simple meals and creative leftovers, though I worried constantly about whether he was getting enough variety and nutrition during such a crucial developmental period. My parents' contracting business thrived in Austin's booming construction market, with Dad's crew working on custom homes that sold for more than I'd earn in a decade. Mom managed their books with the precision of a military accountant, tracking every expense and maximizing every deduction. Their success made my financial struggles more glaring by comparison, especially during family gatherings where they'd casually mention vacation plans or major purchases that represented months of my income. Jake's steady climb up the corporate ladder at Dell provided a stark contrast to my entrepreneurial roller coaster. His bi-weekly paychecks arrived with dependable regularity, funding a lifestyle that included weekend trips to wine country, season tickets to UT football games, and a savings account that actually grew instead of hemorrhaging money to business expenses. He'd landed in Austin's tech industry during a golden period, when established companies offered generous benefits packages and stock options that created real wealth for employees who showed up consistently and performed competently. Rebecca Sterling represented everything my family valued in professional success. Her position at Morrison, Blackwell & Associates, one of Austin's most prestigious law firms, commanded respect at dinner parties and family gatherings. She billed clients at rates that exceeded my monthly income, wore designer suits that cost more than my rent, and drove a BMW that gleamed like a status symbol beacon in our parents' driveway. Her confidence seemed unshakable, built on a foundation of financial security and social recognition that I could only imagine experiencing. The contrast between Rebecca's professional wardrobe and my startup casual attire became more pronounced at every family event. She'd arrive in perfectly tailored blazers and Italian leather shoes, while I wore the same rotation of business casual outfits I'd bought during my corporate days, now showing signs of wear and outdated styling. Her jewelry was understated but expensive, the kind of pieces that whispered wealth rather than shouting it. My accessories came from Target clearance racks and online discount retailers, functional but forgettable. Tommy's relationship with his Uncle Jake provided one of the few bright spots in our family dynamics. Jake genuinely enjoyed spending time with his nephew, teaching him to throw a proper spiral and sharing stories about his own childhood adventures. During family gatherings, they'd disappear into the backyard for impromptu football lessons or nature walks, giving me a brief respite from the subtle interrogations about my business progress and personal life decisions. Rebecca's interactions with Tommy were polite but distant, like she was performing a social obligation rather than engaging with a family member. She'd ask perfunctory questions about school and hobbies, then quickly redirect conversations to adult topics that excluded him from participation. Tommy was perceptive enough to notice her disinterest, though he never complained directly. He'd simply gravitate toward Jake or our parents when Rebecca was present, instinctively seeking connections that felt genuine rather than manufactured. The Austin startup ecosystem operated like a complex social network where connections mattered as much as innovations. I'd attend networking events at trendy venues like the Driscoll Hotel or the Austin Country Club, nursing single drinks while listening to founders pitch their companies to potential investors. These gatherings highlighted the gap between my bootstrap operation and well-funded startups with dedicated marketing budgets and professional development teams. I'd collect business cards and make polite conversation, but rarely found investors who shared my passion for environmental sustainability over quick financial returns. Emma's technical expertise kept SustainTech competitive, despite our resource limitations. She'd spend evenings optimizing our app's performance, implementing user feedback, and researching emerging technologies that could enhance our platform. Her commitment to our shared vision sustained me through periods when I questioned whether I was deluding myself about our potential for success. She understood the technical challenges of building scalable software better than any investor or advisor I'd encountered. The seasonal rhythm of Austin's startup scene created natural cycles of opportunity and disappointment. Fall brought demo days and pitch competitions, events where entrepreneurs presented their companies to rooms full of potential investors and partners. I'd submitted SustainTech to dozens of these competitions, refining our presentation and business model with each iteration. The feedback was consistently positive about our product's potential, but investors wanted to see more traction and clearer paths to profitability before committing capital. Spring ushered in South by Southwest, Austin's annual celebration of technology, music, and culture that transformed the city into a carnival of innovation and networking. The festival created opportunities for startups to gain exposure and make connections, but it also required resources I struggled to afford. While other companies rented booths and hosted elaborate parties, I'd walk the convention floors with homemade business cards, hoping to strike up conversations that might lead to meaningful partnerships or investment opportunities. My relationship with money had become complicated by necessity and shaped by scarcity. Every purchase required careful consideration of its impact on our monthly budget and long-term financial stability. I'd developed an intimate knowledge of free community resources, from library programs to park activities, that could provide Tommy with enriching experiences without straining our finances. The guilt of saying no to his requests for toys or activities that other children took for granted weighed heavily on my conscience. The social isolation of entrepreneurship surprised me more than the financial challenges. While my corporate friends advanced through predictable career paths with regular paychecks and office social structures, I worked alone most days, communicating with users and partners through screens and email. The loneliness was punctuated by networking events and coffee meetings, but those interactions often felt transactional rather than genuinely supportive. Building a business required a different kind of resilience than climbing a corporate ladder. Tommy's school projects became opportunities for me to share SustainTech's mission with his classmates and their families. When he needed to create a presentation about environmental conservation, we'd collaborate on slideshows that incorporated data from our app and examples of local families making sustainable lifestyle changes. His teacher would invite me to speak, to the class about entrepreneurship and environmental responsibility. Moments that reminded me why I'd started this journey despite its challenges. The Austin food scene provided constant reminders of the city's economic stratification. While food trucks and casual dining options remained accessible, the restaurants frequented by successful professionals often required budgets that exceeded my weekly grocery allowance. Family dinner invitations to expensive establishments created social anxiety about ordering appropriately and contributing to shared expenses without appearing cheap or ungrateful. Rebecca's weekend activities reflected a lifestyle supported by dual professional incomes and no dependent children. She'd casually mention spa days, shopping trips to upscale boutiques, and weekend getaways to wine country that cost more than my monthly rent. Her Instagram feed showcased a curated version of success that made my own social media presence feel inadequate by comparison. I'd post about SustainTech milestones and Tommy's achievements, but my content lacked the polished aesthetic that seemed to define professional success in social media terms. The tension between my environmental values and financial reality created daily compromises that tested my principles. While SustainTech promoted sustainable living practices, I often chose cheaper options that weren't necessarily environmentally friendly. Generic brands might use more packaging than premium alternatives, and buying in bulk wasn't always feasible when cash flow was unpredictable. The irony wasn't lost on me that the founder of a sustainability app sometimes made choices based on cost rather than environmental impact. Jake's engagement to Rebecca had shifted family dynamics in subtle but significant ways. Holiday traditions were adjusted to accommodate her preferences, dinner conversations increasingly focused on their wedding plans and future goals, and family photos were carefully arranged to showcase the happy couple's success. I felt my own position in the family narrative diminishing as Jake and Rebecca's relationship became the primary source of parental pride and excitement. The pressure to attend family events increased as wedding planning intensified. Every gathering became an opportunity for Rebecca to share updates about venues, caterers, and guest lists, while my own business updates received polite but minimal attention. The contrast between their celebration milestones and my startup struggles became more pronounced with each passing month, creating an undercurrent of judgment that no one acknowledged directly but everyone seemed to feel. My parents' relationship with Tommy remained loving, but complicated by their concerns about our unconventional lifestyle. They'd shower him with attention during visits while making subtle comments about stability and routine that felt like criticism of my choices. Their offers to help with childcare or financial support always came with strings attached, suggestions that I consider more traditional career paths or living arrangements that would provide Tommy with greater security. The Austin weather provided a reliable constant in our unpredictable routine. Tommy and I would spend evenings at Zilker Park or Lady Bird Lake, activities that cost nothing but provided priceless opportunities for connection and conversation. He'd practice soccer skills while I worked on my laptop, both of us enjoying the outdoor space that made Austin feel like home despite our financial constraints. These moments reminded me that success couldn't be measured solely in monetary terms. Emma's friendship had become essential to my emotional survival as much as my business success. She understood the technical challenges of our work and the personal sacrifices required by entrepreneurship in ways that my family and non-startup friends couldn't grasp. Our weekly check-ins covered business strategy and personal struggles with equal importance, creating a support system that sustained me through the darkest periods of doubt and financial stress. The invitation to Sunday brunch at the Grove arrived via text message from Mom, phrased as a celebration of Jake's promotion, but feeling more like a command performance than a family gathering. Rebecca had chosen the venue, a decision that immediately triggered anxiety about menu prices and appropriate attire. The restaurant represented everything about Austin's upscale dining scene that made me feel like an outsider looking in through expensive windows. Tommy's excitement about the family gathering contrasted sharply with my own apprehension. He'd been working on a school project about recycling and was eager to share his research with everyone, especially his uncle Jake. His enthusiasm for environmental topics always made me proud, even when I worried that his interests might seem unusual to other family members who prioritized more conventional measures of achievement and success. The morning of the brunch, I spent extra time selecting an outfit that would help me blend in at the Grove's upscale environment. My options were limited to a few business casual pieces that had survived from my corporate days, now showing signs of wear that I hoped wouldn't be too obvious in the restaurant's natural lighting. Tommy wore his best polo shirt and khakis, looking handsome and confident as we prepared to join our family for what I assumed would be just another uncomfortable celebration of conventional success. What I didn't realize as we drove through Austin's affluent Westlake neighborhood toward the Grove was that my phone contained an unread email that would change everything. Michael Chen, a partner at one of Austin's most prestigious venture capital firms, had been using SustainTech Solutions for months without my knowledge. His family had experienced remarkable results with our app, reducing their household waste, and discovering local businesses they'd never known existed. That morning, impressed by our platform's impact and potential, he'd decided to reach out about a significant investment opportunity that would transform SustainTech from a bootstrap startup into a properly funded company with unlimited growth potential. The workload that consumed my days had spiraled beyond any reasonable definition of work-life balance. While other entrepreneurs talked about delegating responsibilities and building teams, I handled every aspect of SustainTech Solutions personally. From customer service inquiries at midnight to social media posts scheduled during Tommy's soccer practice. The weight of single-handedly managing a growing app while maintaining the illusion of having everything under control was slowly crushing my spirit, though I'd become expert at hiding the exhaustion behind forced smiles and optimistic updates about our progress. Emma had been pushing me to hire additional help for months, but every calculation of potential salaries against our unpredictable revenue stream ended with the same conclusion. We couldn't afford to expand our team without external funding. I'd written and rewritten job descriptions for positions we desperately needed to fill. Marketing specialists and customer success managers who could handle the increasing demands of our user base. The irony of being too successful to manage success alone wasn't lost on me, but it felt like a luxury problem I couldn't afford to solve. The customer support emails arrived at all hours, users reporting bugs, requesting features, and sharing success stories that kept me motivated despite the overwhelming volume. Families would send detailed messages about how SustainTech had helped them discover bulk food stores, organize neighborhood composting programs, and teach their children about environmental responsibility. Reading those testimonials at 2 in the morning, while Tommy slept peacefully in the next room, reminded me why I'd sacrificed financial security for the chance to build something meaningful. Managing our app's technical infrastructure required constant vigilance and creative problem-solving. Server costs fluctuated based on user activity, and I'd learned to monitor our hosting expenses obsessively, scaling resources up during peak usage periods and down during quieter times to minimize costs. Emma handled the complex technical aspects, but I'd become surprisingly knowledgeable about cloud computing and database management through necessity and late-night research sessions. The marketing budget for SustainTech consisted primarily of time and creativity rather than actual money. I'd taught myself graphic design using free online tutorials, creating social media content and promotional materials that looked professional, despite being produced on a shoestring budget. Tommy had become my unofficial photography assistant, taking pictures of our meals and household sustainability projects that I'd incorporate into Instagram posts and blog articles about environmentally conscious living. Press coverage for environmental technology startups remained frustratingly limited unless companies achieved significant funding milestones or partnered with major corporations. I'd pitched SustainTech to dozens of journalists and bloggers, crafting personalized emails that highlighted our unique approach to helping families reduce waste through technology. The few articles that mentioned us were buried in roundup pieces about green tech trends, generating minimal traffic and even fewer new users. Local business partnerships had become essential for growing our user base and providing value to existing Customers. I'd spend afternoons visiting farmers markets, zero-waste stores, and repair shops throughout Austin, explaining how SustainTech could connect them with environmentally conscious consumers. Most business owners were receptive to the concept, but few understood how technology could drive foot traffic and sales for their establishments. The financial projections I prepared for potential investors told a compelling story about market opportunity and growth potential, but they couldn't disguise the reality that SustainTech was still essentially a one-person operation dependent on my ability to work unsustainable hours. Venture capitalists wanted to see evidence of a scalable business model and experienced management team, not a single mother juggling coding, marketing, customer service, and business development while raising an 8-year-old son. Tommy's school schedule had become the organizing principle around which I structured my work responsibilities. I'd handle East Coast customer calls during his morning routine, schedule West Coast meetings during his after-school program, and save administrative tasks for evenings when he was doing homework or sleeping. The boundaries between work and parenting had dissolved completely, creating a lifestyle that was simultaneously flexible and completely consuming. My relationship with sleep had become purely transactional, something I allocated based on immediate necessity rather than biological needs. The blue light from my laptop screen illuminated too many midnight hours, and I'd developed an intimate familiarity with Austin's early morning sounds. Delivery trucks rumbling down East Austin streets, coffee shop employees arriving for opening shifts, and the gradual awakening of a city that never seemed to rest. The emotional toll of constantly defending my choices to family members who didn't understand entrepreneurship was becoming harder to manage. Every family gathering included subtle interrogations about my business progress, unsolicited advice, about job opportunities, and comparisons to Jake's steady advancement through corporate hierarchies. The questions were posed with apparent concern for my welfare, but they felt like attacks on my competence and judgment as both a professional and a parent. Rebecca's background in corporate law gave her opinions about business strategy and authority that my family found compelling, even when her advice revealed fundamental misunderstandings about how technology startups operated. She'd suggest marketing approaches that required budgets we didn't have, or recommend legal structures that made sense for established companies but would cripple a bootstrap operation. Her confidence in delivering these recommendations made my attempts to explain why they weren't applicable seem defensive and ungrateful. The contrast between Rebecca's professional wardrobe and my startup casual attire had become a source of increasing self-consciousness during family events. She'd arrive at gatherings wearing designer pieces that probably cost more than my monthly income, while I rotated through the same few business casual outfits that had survived from my corporate days. The disparity in our appearance served as a visual reminder of our different levels of financial success and professional status. Jake's relationship with Rebecca seemed built on shared values about career advancement and financial security that made perfect sense to my parents. They'd discuss investment strategies, retirement planning, and real estate opportunities with the fluency of people who had surplus income to manage rather than bills to juggle. Their conversations highlighted how far removed my own financial reality was from the concerns of successful professionals who could plan years ahead with confidence. My parents' contracting business continued to thrive in Austin's booming construction market, providing them with financial security that made my entrepreneurial struggles seem unnecessarily risky and self-imposed. Dad would mention million-dollar projects with casual pride, while Mom shared stories about managing their expanding business operations. Their success made my inability to generate consistent revenue from SustainTech appear more glaring by comparison. The social dynamics of Austin's startup community reflected broader patterns of privilege and access that made networking challenging for founders without traditional backgrounds or connections. Pitch events and investor meetups were often held at exclusive venues that required membership fees or professional sponsorships to access. The informal conversations that led to funding opportunities frequently happened at expensive restaurants or private clubs where bootstrapped entrepreneurs couldn't afford to participate. Emma's technical expertise had become even more valuable as SustainTech's user base grew and our platform's complexity increased. She'd implemented features that I couldn't have imagined when we started. Sophisticated algorithms that analyzed user behavior and recommended personalized sustainability strategies. Her ability to translate my vision into functional code was the foundation of everything we'd accomplished. But I worried constantly about my inability to compensate her fairly for contributions that were essential to our success. The Austin food scene provided constant reminders of economic stratification that made family dinners at upscale restaurants particularly uncomfortable. While I'd learned to navigate menus strategically, ordering carefully to minimize costs while avoiding obvious cheapness, the casual way other family members selected expensive entrees and premium drinks highlighted the gulf between our financial situations. The stress of calculating appropriate tip amounts while Rebecca ordered another round of craft cocktails was exhausting. Tommy's environmental consciousness had deepened through exposure to SustainTech's mission and our family's increasingly eco-friendly lifestyle choices. He'd become an enthusiastic advocate for recycling and composting at school, convincing classmates to participate in environmental projects and sharing facts about sustainability that impressed his teachers. His passion for these topics made me proud, even when I worried that his intensity might seem unusual to other children and their parents. The regulatory environment for apps that collected user data required constant attention to privacy policies and compliance requirements that were expensive to implement properly. I'd spent countless hours researching federal and state regulations, consulting with attorneys I couldn't afford, and updating our terms of service to protect both users and our company from potential legal issues. The complexity of these requirements favored established companies with dedicated legal teams over bootstrap startups operating on minimal budgets. Customer acquisition costs for SustainTech remained frustratingly high, despite our organic growth. Through word-of-mouth referrals and social media engagement, paid advertising campaigns were beyond our budget, and organic marketing required time and creativity that I struggled to maintain while handling all other aspects of the business. Every new user represented a significant investment of effort in content creation, community engagement, and customer support that wasn't immediately reflected in revenue generation. The seasonal patterns of environmental awareness created predictable spikes in user engagement around Earth Day and other sustainability-focused events, but maintaining momentum throughout the year required constant innovation and content creation. I'd learned to plan marketing campaigns around these natural peaks in interest, preparing educational content and promotional materials months in advance to maximize impact during high awareness periods. My relationship with uncertainty had evolved from paralyzing anxiety to grudging acceptance as the default state of entrepreneurial life. Financial projections were educated guesses rather than reliable predictions. User growth fluctuated based on factors beyond my control, and competitor actions could disrupt our market position overnight. The inability to plan more than a few months ahead with any confidence was mentally exhausting, but had taught me to be more adaptable and resourceful. The physical demands of working 16-hour days while maintaining household responsibilities and parenting duties were taking an observable toll on my health and appearance. I'd lost weight from irregular eating habits and stress, developed chronic headaches from staring at screens for extended periods, and noticed my skin showing signs of exhaustion that no amount of concealer could hide. The irony of promoting healthy, sustainable living while neglecting my own wellness wasn't lost on me. Tommy's school projects had become opportunities for me to share SustainTech's educational content with his classmates and their families, creating a pipeline of potential users who were already interested in environmental topics. His presentations about recycling and conservation incorporated data visualization tools I'd developed for our app, impressing teachers who weren't familiar with the sophisticated technology available to support environmental education. The investment landscape for environmental technology startups remained challenging despite growing awareness of climate change and sustainability issues. Most venture capital funds focused on enterprise software or consumer products with clear paths to rapid scaling and high profit margins. Environmental apps serving individual families didn't fit traditional investment models that required massive user bases and aggressive monetization strategies. Emma's commitment to SustainTech, despite irregular compensation, had created a partnership based on shared vision rather than financial incentives. But I worried constantly about her ability to sustain her involvement without more predictable income. She'd turned down higher-paying opportunities to continue working on our platform, and her loyalty felt like both a blessing and a burden that added pressure to my efforts to secure funding and stabilize our business operations. The Austin entrepreneurial ecosystem provided access to mentorship and educational resources that were invaluable for learning business skills I'd never needed in corporate environments. I'd attended workshops on financial modeling, legal compliance, and marketing strategy, absorbing information that helped me make more informed decisions about SustainTech's development. The knowledge was empowering, but it also highlighted how much I still needed to learn about running a successful company. Local media coverage of Austin's startup scene focused primarily on companies that achieved significant funding milestones or were founded by entrepreneurs with impressive credentials and connections. SustainTech's bootstrap approach and my background as a single mother didn't fit the typical success narratives that journalists preferred to cover. The lack of media attention made it harder to build brand awareness and attract users who might benefit from our platform. The complexity of App Store optimization and mobile marketing required specialized knowledge that I'd acquired through trial and error rather than formal training. Understanding algorithm changes, keyword optimization, and user review management had become essential skills for maintaining SustainTech's visibility among thousands of competing apps. The constant evolution of these platforms meant that strategies that worked one month might be ineffective the next. Tommy's relationship with technology had been shaped by his exposure to SustainTech's development process and his understanding of how apps could be tools for positive change rather than just entertainment. He'd become genuinely interested in coding and environmental science, combining both interests in school projects that impressed his teachers and classmates. His enthusiasm for these subjects suggested that my unconventional career path might be providing him with valuable perspectives on innovation and social responsibility. The financial stress of managing irregular income while maintaining consistent living expenses had taught me creative approaches to budgeting and resource management that I'd never needed during my corporate career. I'd become expert at maximizing value from minimal resources, finding free alternatives to expensive services, and negotiating payment terms that aligned with SustainTech's unpredictable cash flow patterns. Rebecca's suggestions about my business strategy were becoming more frequent and insistent, presented with the confidence of someone who'd never actually operated a startup, but had plenty of theoretical knowledge about business operations. Her recommendations often reflected corporate law perspectives that didn't translate effectively to early-stage companies operating in dynamic markets with limited resources. The gap between her advice and my operational reality was widening, but explaining why her suggestions weren't applicable made me seem defensive and unreceptive to input. The Sunday morning brunch invitation from my mother felt less like a celebration, and more like a performance I was expected to deliver, despite having little enthusiasm for the occasion. The Grove represented everything about Austin's upscale dining culture that made me uncomfortable. From the valet parking I couldn't afford to the menu prices that required careful calculation against my weekly grocery budget. Tommy's excitement about spending time with his uncle and grandparents provided the only motivation I needed to attend another family gathering, where my unconventional choices would be subjected to subtle scrutiny and unsolicited advice about career planning and financial responsibility. The morning light filtering through the Grove's floor-to-ceiling windows created the perfect backdrop for what should have been a pleasant family celebration. Tommy sat beside me, his small hands folded politely in his lap as he listened to the adults discuss Jake's promotion and Rebecca's latest case victories. The restaurant's ambiance was designed to impress, with white tablecloths, fresh flowers, and servers who moved with practiced efficiency between tables filled with Austin's professional elite enjoying their weekend luxury. Rebecca had orchestrated the seating arrangement with characteristic precision, positioning herself where the natural light would be most flattering, while ensuring that she commanded the best view of the dining room. She wore a cream-colored designer blouse that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, paired with jewelry that caught the sunlight in calculated flashes of gold and diamonds. Her confidence radiated from every gesture, from the way she summoned our server to her authoritative discussions about wine pairings that none of us had requested. Jake beamed with the satisfaction of someone whose life was progressing exactly according to plan. His promotion to senior marketing manager at Dell had come with a substantial salary increase and stock options that would vest over the next 4 years. He spoke enthusiastically about his new responsibilities, the team he'd be managing, and the strategic initiatives he'd be spearheading. His success felt genuine and well-earned, the result of consistent performance and political navigation that had positioned him perfectly for advancement within Austin's competitive tech industry. My parents hung on every word of Jake and Rebecca's updates, their faces glowing with the pride that came from witnessing conventional achievement and financial security. Mom had dressed carefully for the occasion, wearing her best jewelry and a dress she reserved for special celebrations. Dad looked comfortable and prosperous, his contracting business having provided him with the financial confidence that came from decades of steady growth and satisfied customers. They represented the American dream realized through hard work and traditional choices. Tommy absorbed the adult conversation with the patient attention of a child who'd learned to find entertainment in observing family dynamics he didn't fully understand. He'd brought a small notebook where he sketched rockets and planets while the adults talked, occasionally looking up to smile when someone addressed him directly. His presence grounded me, reminding me that regardless of how this meal progressed, I had the most important job in the world waiting at home, raising a kind, intelligent human being. The menu at the Grove reflected Austin's sophisticated culinary scene, with locally sourced ingredients and creative preparations that justified premium pricing. I scanned the options carefully, calculating costs against my weekly budget, while trying to appear relaxed about the selection process. Rebecca had already announced her intention to order the market seafood special, a dish that cost more than I typically spent on groceries for an entire day. The casual way she made expensive choices highlighted the gulf between our financial realities. Our server approached with professional warmth, describing daily specials and wine recommendations with the enthusiasm of someone who assumed everyone at the table shared similar budgets and dining priorities. Rebecca immediately took charge of the ordering process, making suggestions and asking detailed questions about preparation methods that demonstrated her familiarity with upscale dining expectations. I nodded politely, while internally calculating the minimum I could order without appearing conspicuously frugal. The conversation flowed smoothly through topics that showcased my family's conventional successes: Jake's career advancement, Rebecca's high-profile legal cases, my parents' business expansion plans, and various social activities that required disposable income and flexible schedules. I contributed when appropriate, sharing updates about Tommy's school achievements and my volunteer work with environmental organizations, carefully avoiding detailed discussions about SustainTech's ongoing challenges. Tommy's enthusiasm for his environmental studies project provided a natural opening for me to mention some of SustainTech's educational initiatives without seeming self-promotional. He described his research about recycling programs and waste reduction strategies with the passionate intensity that made me proud of his developing social consciousness. Rebecca listened politely but quickly redirected the conversation to more conventionally impressive topics that better reflected adult professional accomplishments. The food arrived with presentation worthy of the restaurant's reputation and pricing, artfully arranged dishes that looked like photographs from culinary magazines. Rebecca immediately began documenting her meal with carefully composed smartphone photos, adjusting lighting and angles to capture images suitable for social media sharing. Her Instagram presence was as carefully curated as her professional appearance, showcasing a lifestyle of consistent luxury and aesthetic perfection. Jake's stories about his corporate environment revealed a world of strategic planning sessions, team-building exercises, and client presentations that felt familiar yet foreign to my current entrepreneurial reality. He described challenges and victories that were measurable and recognized within established hierarchies, achievements that came with clear rewards and advancement opportunities. His career path offered predictability and security that my startup journey couldn't match. My parents' questions about my business were posed with apparent interest but underlying concern about my unconventional choices and their impact on Tommy's stability. They'd ask about revenue and customer growth with the same tone they might use to discuss a hobby that had gotten out of hand. Their worry was genuine, rooted in love and desire for my security, but it felt like judgment of my competence and decision-making abilities. Rebecca's expertise in corporate law gave her opinions about business strategy, an authority that my family found compelling, even when her recommendations revealed fundamental misunderstandings about startup operations and bootstrap financing. She'd offer advice about legal structures and growth strategies with absolute confidence, presenting complex topics in simplified terms that sounded reasonable but weren't applicable to my situation. Challenging her suggestions required technical explanations that made me appear defensive. The ambient noise of the grove created a backdrop of affluent leisure, conversations about vacation plans and luxury purchases that highlighted Austin's economic stratification. Nearby tables featured discussions about real estate investments, private school selections, and country club memberships that represented lifestyle choices available to people with substantial disposable income. The social environment reinforced the impression that success was measured primarily through financial achievement and material acquisition. Tommy's quiet observation of adult interactions had taught him to recognize social dynamics that other children might miss, though he rarely commented directly on what he noticed. He'd developed an intuitive understanding of when conversations were becoming tense or when certain topics made people uncomfortable. His emotional intelligence was remarkable for an 8-year-old, probably developed through exposure to adult stress and financial uncertainty that most children his age didn't experience. Rebecca's phone buzzed frequently throughout the meal, displaying notifications from various social media platforms and professional communications that she'd check discreetly between courses. Her digital connectivity was seamless and constant, managing multiple streams of information and maintaining her professional presence even during family social events. The contrast with my own limited digital engagement, constrained by time and resources, was subtle but noticeable. The dessert course provided an opportunity for extended conversation about future plans and family expectations that felt more like an informal performance review than casual social interaction. Rebecca discussed their wedding timeline and honeymoon destination with the detailed planning that characterized her approach to major life events. Every aspect of their celebration would be documented and shared, creating permanent records of their success and happiness. Jake's contentment with his traditional career path and conventional lifestyle choices seemed genuine and well-suited to his personality and values. He'd found satisfaction in corporate achievement and financial security that provided clear benchmarks for success and progress. His happiness was evident and legitimate, making my own unconventional struggles appear more questionable by comparison. The contrast between our choices wasn't inherently judgmental, but the family dynamics made it feel competitive. My parents' relief at Jake's conventional success was palpable, representing validation of their own values and parenting approaches. They'd raised children who understood the importance of financial stability and social recognition, concepts that had guided their own lives and business decisions. My departure from these principles probably felt like rejection of their wisdom and experience, even though my choices weren't intended as criticism of their approach. The restaurant's atmosphere encouraged leisurely dining and extended conversation, creating pressure to participate in social rituals that felt increasingly artificial and performative. Rebecca's ability to command attention and direct discussion topics made me feel like an audience member at my own family gathering, present, but not central to the main performance. Her confidence and social skills were genuinely impressive, making my own quieter personality seem less engaging by comparison. Tommy's patience with adult conversation was remarkable, but finite, and I could see signs that he was becoming restless, despite his efforts to remain polite and engaged. He'd finished his sketching and was now quietly observing the dining room's other patrons, probably creating stories about their lives and relationships. His creativity and imagination provided entertainment that didn't require adult attention or expensive resources. The check's arrival created the predictable moment of awkwardness that occurred whenever our family dined at expensive restaurants, with subtle negotiations about payment responsibility that reflected underlying assumptions about everyone's financial capacity. Rebecca immediately reached for her designer wallet, making generous gestures that highlighted her ability to contribute significantly without financial stress. My own calculations about appropriate contribution levels required discrete mental arithmetic that I hoped wasn't obvious to other family members. The conversation gradually shifted toward family gossip and social updates that felt safer than professional discussions, but still highlighted differences in our social circles and lifestyle choices. Rebecca's network included other successful professionals who shared similar interests and financial resources, creating social opportunities that required both money and time that I couldn't allocate to recreational activities. Her social calendar was full of events and gatherings that reinforced her professional status and personal brand. My phone had been sitting silently in my purse throughout the meal, and I'd resisted the urge to check messages or notifications that might be related to SustainTech's operations. Customer support emails and technical issues didn't respect weekend boundaries, but family gatherings required my full attention, despite the anxiety that came from being disconnected from business communications. The mental discipline required to remain present was exhausting. Jake's enthusiasm for their upcoming wedding celebration reflected his genuine happiness and excitement about building a life with Rebecca, emotions that were infectious and heartwarming. Despite my own complicated feelings about their relationship dynamics, his love was evident and sincere, making my concerns about Rebecca's treatment of our family seem petty and jealous. Their partnership worked for them, regardless of my personal reservations about compatibility and values. The meal was approaching, its natural conclusion when Rebecca's expression shifted from relaxed satisfaction to focused attention as she glanced at her phone screen. A call was coming through that she clearly felt compelled to answer, despite the social awkwardness of taking business communications during family meals. Her professional obligations didn't recognize weekend boundaries, much like my own entrepreneurial responsibilities, though her interruptions were probably more financially rewarding than mine. She answered with her professional voice, crisp and authoritative, immediately transitioning into corporate communication mode that transformed her entire demeanor. The conversation was brief but intense, with Rebecca asking clarifying questions and making notes on her napkin while the rest of us sat in respectful silence. Her ability to switch between social and professional personas was impressive, though it highlighted how much of her identity was tied to career achievement and status. When she ended the call, Rebecca's face showed a mixture of surprise and calculation that suggested the conversation had been unexpected and significant. She looked directly at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between shock and reassessment that made me uncomfortable. The shift in her attention was so pronounced that other family members noticed, creating a moment of tension that none of us understood. Rebecca's voice carried an edge of disbelief as she spoke directly to me for the first time during the entire meal. The words that came out of her mouth would replay in my memory for years afterward, delivered with the casual cruelty that only someone who'd never experienced real struggle could manage. She called me the broke sibling with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, suggesting that my entrepreneurial efforts were embarrassing the family, and that my financial situation was somehow shameful rather than simply challenging. The comment landed like a physical blow, sharp and unexpected, silencing the table's conversation and creating a moment of frozen shock that seemed to suspend time itself. Tommy's small hand found mine under the table, his 8-year-old intuition, recognizing that something hurtful had just happened, even if he didn't understand the adult dynamics at play. My parents exchanged glances that suggested this wasn't the first time they'd heard such sentiments expressed, though perhaps never so directly. Jake's face showed genuine surprise at Rebecca's comment, suggesting that this level of directness wasn't typical of their private conversations about family dynamics. His discomfort was visible, but didn't translate into immediate defense of his sister, creating another layer of hurt that cut deeper than Rebecca's initial attack. The silence stretched uncomfortably as everyone processed what had just been said and what response might be appropriate. Rebecca's phone rang again before anyone could formulate a response to her devastating comment, the interruption arriving with timing that felt almost orchestrated by forces beyond our control. She glanced at the screen with the same professional focus she'd shown for the previous call, but her expression changed completely when she read the caller identification. The confidence that had characterized her entire demeanor throughout the meal dissolved into something approaching panic. The caller was Michael Chen from Austin Ventures, one of the city's most prestigious venture capital firms, and he was calling about SustainTech Solutions. Rebecca's face went pale as she realized the implications of the conversation she was about to have, understanding immediately that the broke sibling she'd just publicly humiliated was about to receive a call that would change everything. Her hand trembled slightly as she handed me the phone, her voice barely audible as she explained who was calling and why. Michael Chen's voice was warm and professional as he introduced himself and explained that his family had been using SustainTech for several months with remarkable results. They'd reduced their household waste by over 60%, discovered local businesses they'd never known existed, and completely transformed their approach to sustainable living. He'd been so impressed with our platform that he'd researched our company extensively, and he was calling to discuss a potential investment opportunity that could provide the funding we needed to scale our operations nationally. The conversation continued with Michael explaining that Austin Ventures was prepared to offer a Series A investment of $2.5 million with additional funding available for expansion and team building. He'd already reviewed our user data, financial projections, and technical architecture, and he was convinced that SustainTech represented exactly the kind of environmental technology solution that could achieve massive scale while generating significant returns for investors and positive impact for communities. The silence at our table was deafening as I listened to Michael's offer and asked clarifying questions about terms, timeline, and expectations for our partnership. Every word of the conversation was audible to my family members, who sat frozen in their chairs as they processed the complete reversal of everything they'd believed about my business and financial prospects. Rebecca's face had gone from pale to ashen, her confident superiority replaced by the dawning realization that she'd just publicly humiliated someone who was about to become significantly more successful than she'd ever imagined. Tommy squeezed my hand tighter as he sensed the importance of the phone call. His young mind probably not fully understanding the business implications, but recognizing that something momentous was happening. His support was wordless but essential, grounding me in the reality that success meant more than just financial achievement. The little boy who'd sat patiently through adult conversations about conventional success was about to witness his mother's vindication in the most dramatic way possible. Michael's final comments about Austin Ventures' excitement to partner with SustainTech and his request to schedule a meeting for the following week to discuss implementation details provided the perfect conclusion to a conversation that had transformed my family's perception of my entrepreneurial journey. When I ended the call and set the phone down on the white tablecloth, the silence continued for several more seconds before Jake found his voice to ask what had just happened. My explanation of the investment offer and its implications for SustainTech's future was delivered with the calm professionalism I'd developed through months of investor presentations, though internally I was processing emotions ranging from vindication to exhaustion to profound relief. The broke sibling who'd been embarrassing the family was about to become the most financially successful member of our generation, with a company valued at levels that exceeded Rebecca's annual salary by substantial margins. Rebecca's attempt to apologize for her earlier comment was awkward and insufficient, delivered with the recognition that she'd revealed her true feelings about my life choices at exactly the wrong moment. Her discomfort was palpable as she realized that everyone at the table had witnessed her casual cruelty towards someone who was about to achieve the kind of business success that she'd probably never experience in her corporate legal career. My parents' expressions showed a mixture of shock, pride, and perhaps some guilt about their own doubts regarding my entrepreneurial journey. Dad's contracting business was successful by any reasonable measure, but SustainTech's valuation would exceed his lifetime earnings within a few years if our growth projections proved accurate. Mom's careful financial management had taught me skills that were directly applicable to startup operations, though she'd probably never imagined those lessons would lead to venture capital investment. Jake's genuine happiness for my success was immediately evident, his brotherly pride overcoming any potential jealousy or competitiveness that might have complicated our relationship. His questions about the investment process and growth plans showed authentic interest in understanding what I'd built and how it would develop. His support felt unconditional and loving, providing emotional validation that meant more than financial achievement. Tommy's excitement was pure and unfiltered, his 8-year-old enthusiasm for his mother's success unmarred by adult complexities about money and status. He understood that something wonderful had happened, and that the app we'd worked on together had been recognized as valuable by important people. His pride in our shared project was the most meaningful recognition I could have received. The remainder of our brunch passed in a blur of questions, explanations, and awkward attempts to return to normal family conversation after such a dramatic reversal of perceived success and failure. Rebecca's confidence never fully recovered. Her earlier dominance of the social dynamic replaced by quiet participation and frequent glances at her phone that suggested she was processing implications beyond the immediate family gathering. The drive home with Tommy provided the first opportunity to privately process what had just occurred and what it would mean for our future. His questions about the phone call and the investment were practical and insightful, reflecting his deep understanding of our struggles and his excitement about new possibilities. The apartment that had felt cramped and limiting that morning now seemed like the launching pad for adventures we'd only dreamed about. The email from Michael Chen that I found waiting when I checked my messages that evening contained detailed terms and conditions that exceeded even his verbal offer, with additional provisions for employee stock options, expansion funding, and strategic partnerships that could accelerate SustainTech's growth beyond my most optimistic projections. The formal offer would require legal review and negotiation, but the fundamental transformation of our financial reality was already certain. Emma's reaction to the news was immediate and emotional, her relief and excitement reflecting the months of uncertainty and unpaid work she'd invested in our shared vision. The funding would allow us to build the team we'd always needed, implement features we'd postponed due to resource constraints, and market our platform to the national audience that could benefit from our environmental technology solutions. The subsequent weeks brought changes that felt both overwhelming and inevitable, as SustainTech's transformation from bootstrap startup to venture-funded company required rapid adaptation to new opportunities and responsibilities. The broke sibling, who'd embarrassed her family at Sunday brunch, had become an entrepreneur whose success story would be featured in Austin's business publications and startup community case studies. Rebecca's wedding planning continued with less enthusiasm and more tension, as the family dynamics had shifted in ways that made her previous authority and confidence seem less natural and commanding. Her relationship with Jake remained strong, but her interactions with other family members carried an undertone of awkwardness that probably wouldn't completely disappear. The casual cruelty she'd displayed toward someone she'd considered financially inferior had revealed character traits that couldn't be completely forgotten or forgiven. My parents' support became more vocal and practical as they recognized that my entrepreneurial journey had succeeded beyond their most optimistic expectations. Dad's business experience provided valuable insights about scaling operations and managing growth, while Mom's financial acumen helped me understand investment terms and equity structures that would protect Tommy's future security. The apartment we'd outgrown became the symbol of a journey that had started with determination and faith rather than resources or connections. Moving to a larger space in a better neighborhood felt like completing a circle that began with the decision to leave corporate security for the uncertain rewards of building something meaningful. Tommy's new room had space for both rockets and coding projects, reflecting the expanded possibilities that success had created. The environmental impact of SustainTech's expanded reach exceeded my original vision. With families across the country using our platform to reduce waste, discover sustainable businesses, and teach children about environmental responsibility, the financial success was gratifying, but the social mission that had motivated my original decision to leave corporate comfort remained the most important measure of our achievement. Years later, at family gatherings that had become more genuinely celebratory and less performative, Rebecca would occasionally reference that Sunday brunch as a turning point in her understanding of success and judgment. Her legal career continued to flourish, but her approach to evaluating other people's choices became more thoughtful and less dismissive. The lesson about assuming failure based on appearances rather than substance had been learned through public embarrassment that probably benefited her personal development. Tommy's memory of that morning would include both the hurt of watching his mother being attacked and the excitement of witnessing her vindication, experiences that shaped his understanding of perseverance and justice in ways that no classroom lesson could have provided. His own environmental advocacy and eventual career in sustainable technology were directly influenced by witnessing how determination and vision could overcome skepticism and financial constraints. The phone call that changed everything arrived at exactly the moment when it would have maximum impact, transforming not just my financial prospects, but my family's understanding of entrepreneurship, risk-taking, and the different forms that success could assume. The broke sibling who'd embarrassed everyone had become the family member whose achievements would be celebrated and remembered for generations. The revelation that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my journey began with an email I hadn't even noticed arriving. While I sat in the Grove's elegant dining room, enduring Rebecca's pointed comments about my hobby business and watching my family nod in uncomfortable agreement, my phone had quietly received a message that would reframe 18 months of struggle into something entirely different. Michael Chen, a name I'd never heard before that morning, had been watching SustainTech Solutions from a distance, and his perspective on what I'd built would prove that sometimes the most important validation comes from places you never expected to find it. The backstory that Michael would later share with me revealed connections that stretched back months before our family brunch confrontation. Threads of cause and effect that had been weaving together while I struggled with server costs and customer support emails in my cramped East Austin apartment. His wife Jennifer had discovered SustainTech through a local parenting blog that featured environmentally conscious apps for families, downloading our platform during a particularly busy period when she was trying to reduce their household's environmental impact while managing 2 young children and a demanding career as a pediatric nurse. Jennifer Chen's initial experience with SustainTech had been transformative in ways that neither she nor Michael had anticipated when she first started tracking their family's waste patterns and exploring our recommendations for sustainable local businesses. Within the first month of using our app, they'd discovered 3 farmers markets within driving distance of their Westlake Hills home, found a bulk grocery store that reduced their packaging waste by 70%, and connected with a neighborhood composting program that had been operating for years without their knowledge. The data visualization features that Emma had spent countless late nights perfecting allowed the Chen family to see their environmental impact in real time, creating a gamified experience that motivated their 2 children to participate enthusiastically in waste reduction challenges and sustainability experiments. Their 8-year-old daughter had become passionate about documenting their progress through photographs and charts, while their 10-year-old son had started a composting project at his elementary school based on information he'd learned through SustainTech's educational modules. Michael's background as a venture capitalist had trained him to recognize scalable business models and market opportunities that other investors might overlook. But his personal experience with SustainTech had been purely as a consumer rather than a professional evaluator. The app had solved real problems for his family while providing measurable results that impressed him with their consistency and impact. Their monthly grocery bills had decreased by 30%, despite buying higher quality organic products, and their household waste had been reduced so dramatically that they'd been able to downsize their garbage service. The environmental impact data that SustainTech generated for the Chen family had become a source of genuine pride and motivation for lifestyle changes that extended far beyond what our app directly addressed. They'd started growing vegetables in their backyard, installed solar panels on their roof, and purchased an electric vehicle based on confidence they'd gained through successfully implementing smaller sustainability changes. The ripple effects of their initial engagement with our platform had transformed their entire approach to conscious living. Jennifer's enthusiasm for SustainTech had led her to recommend the app to other families in their social circle, creating an organic word-of-mouth marketing campaign that Michael observed with professional interest even before he'd considered our company as a potential investment opportunity. The recommendations were genuine and passionate, based on authentic positive experiences rather than promotional incentives, creating the kind of user advocacy that venture capitalists recognize as indicative of product-market fit and genuine value creation. The technical sophistication of SustainTech's back-end architecture had impressed Michael when he'd started researching our company's operations and development approach. Emma's coding work was elegant and scalable, built with enterprise-level practices despite our bootstrap budget constraints. The data privacy protections we'd implemented exceeded industry standards, and our user interface design reflected deep understanding of family dynamics and behavioral psychology that could support long-term engagement and habit formation. Michael's investigation into SustainTech's competitive landscape had revealed that while several apps addressed environmental tracking or local business discovery, none combined these functions with the educational components and community features that made our platform uniquely valuable for families with children. The market opportunity was substantial and underserved, with growing consumer awareness of environmental issues creating demand for practical tools that could translate concern into actionable behavior changes. The financial analysis that Michael had conducted on SustainTech's operations showed a company that was efficiently managed despite resource constraints, with customer acquisition costs that were sustainable and user retention rates that indicated strong product-market fit. Our revenue per user was modest, but growing consistently, and our operational expenses were lean enough to suggest that additional funding could drive rapid scaling without burning through investment capital inefficiently. Emma's technical roadmap for SustainTech's future development had caught Michael's attention when he'd reviewed our investor presentation materials, which I'd uploaded to a startup showcase platform months earlier without receiving any meaningful responses. The planned features were ambitious but realistic, building on our existing foundation to create more sophisticated analytics, expanded marketplace functionality, and enterprise partnerships that could accelerate user acquisition while generating multiple revenue streams. The timing of Michael's decision to reach out about SustainTech had been influenced by several market factors that were creating favorable conditions for environmental technology investments. Consumer spending on sustainable products was increasing rapidly. Regulatory changes were creating incentives for businesses to reduce environmental impact, and institutional investors were allocating capital specifically to companies with measurable environmental, social, and governance benefits. Austin Ventures' investment thesis focused on early-stage companies with proven traction in underserved markets, particularly those led by founders who demonstrated deep understanding of customer needs and commitment to long-term value creation, rather than quick exits. SustainTech's combination of social impact and scalable technology aligned perfectly with their portfolio strategy, and my background as a single mother building a mission-driven company provided the kind of founder story that resonated with their investment committee. The due diligence process that Michael had initiated before contacting me had included conversations with several SustainTech users who'd provided detailed feedback about their experiences with our platform. The testimonials were overwhelmingly positive, with families describing specific behavior changes, financial savings, and educational benefits that their children had gained through regular app usage. The qualitative feedback supported the quantitative, metrics that showed steady growth and strong user engagement. Michael's personal experience with venture capital investment had taught him to recognize the difference between companies that solved theoretical problems and those that addressed real pain points for identifiable customer segments. SustainTech fell clearly into the second category, with users who were willing to pay for premium features and actively recommend the platform to friends and family members. The organic growth we'd achieved without marketing budget demonstrated market demand that could be amplified through proper funding and professional marketing strategies. The competitive analysis that Austin Ventures had conducted showed that while environmental consciousness was becoming mainstream, most existing solutions were either too complex for average families or too simplistic to drive meaningful behavior change. SustainTech occupied a sweet spot that balanced functionality with accessibility, providing sophisticated tracking capabilities through an interface that children could navigate independently, while offering parents detailed insights about their household's environmental impact. Jennifer Chen's documentation of their family's SustainTech journey had become remarkably detailed over the months they'd been using our platform, creating a case study that demonstrated the kind of long-term engagement and lifestyle integration that venture capitalists look for when evaluating consumer technology investments. Their usage patterns showed consistent daily interaction, steady progression through app features, and increasing engagement with community elements that suggested strong network effects potential. The educational impact that SustainTech had, achieved in the Chen household, extended beyond environmental awareness to include lessons about data analysis, goal setting, and systems thinking that were preparing their children for future academic and professional success. Michael recognized that these secondary benefits created additional value propositions that could expand our target market beyond environmentally conscious families to include parents prioritizing educational technology and STEM learning opportunities. Michael's research into my background as SustainTech's founder had revealed a combination of corporate marketing experience, environmental passion, and entrepreneurial determination that suggested strong potential for scaling the company successfully, with appropriate support and resources. My decision to leave stable employment for entrepreneurial uncertainty demonstrated commitment levels that venture capitalists value, while my technical collaboration with Emma showed ability to build and manage effective partnerships. The customer support interactions that I'd been handling personally had created a level of user satisfaction and loyalty that impressed Michael when he'd reviewed our App Store ratings and social media engagement. Families felt genuinely supported by SustainTech's team, creating emotional connections to our brand that would be difficult for competitors to replicate even with larger marketing budgets. The personal touch that resource constraints had forced me to maintain was actually a competitive advantage that proper scaling could preserve and amplify. Austin's environmental consciousness and startup culture created an ideal testing ground for SustainTech's approach to sustainable living technology. But Michael recognized that our success in this market indicated potential for national expansion to other metropolitan areas with similar demographics and values. The localization features that Emma had built into our platform could be adapted for different regions, creating scalable growth opportunities that didn't require fundamental changes to our core technology. The partnership opportunities that Michael envisioned for SustainTech included collaborations with major retailers, educational institutions, and municipal sustainability programs that could provide both revenue streams and user acquisition channels. These partnerships would require the kind of business development resources and credibility that venture capital funding could provide, transforming SustainTech from a bootstrap startup into a legitimate player in the growing environmental technology sector. Emma's technical vision for SustainTech's artificial intelligence capabilities had particularly excited Michael when he'd reviewed our development roadmap. recognizing that machine learning applications could create personalized sustainability recommendations that would increase user engagement while generating valuable data about consumer behavior patterns. The privacy-first approach we'd taken to data collection would be essential for building trust with families while creating insights that could benefit both users and business partners. The social impact measurement framework that we'd developed for tracking SustainTech's environmental benefits provided the kind of accountability and transparency that impact investors required when evaluating mission-driven companies. Our ability to demonstrate concrete waste reduction, energy savings, and local business support through user data created compelling evidence that technology could drive positive environmental change at scale. Michael's experience with successful startup exits had taught him to recognize founding teams that could adapt to rapid growth while maintaining the core values and customer focus that had driven their initial success. My partnership with Emma demonstrated complementary skills and shared vision that suggested we could scale SustainTech effectively without losing the authentic mission that had attracted our first users and generated organic word-of-mouth marketing. The investment structure that Austin Ventures was prepared to offer included not just capital, but strategic support through their network of experienced advisors, potential customers, and follow-on investors who could accelerate SustainTech's growth beyond what funding alone could achieve. The firm's reputation in Austin's startup ecosystem would provide credibility that could open doors to partnerships and opportunities that had been inaccessible to a bootstrap operation. Jennifer Chen's detailed feedback about SustainTech's user experience had included suggestions for features and improvements that aligned closely with Emma's technical roadmap, confirming that our development priorities were addressing real user needs rather than theoretical enhancements. The convergence between user requests and our planned innovations indicated strong product-market fit that could support successful scaling with appropriate resources. The market research that Michael had commissioned specifically about environmental technology adoption showed accelerating consumer interest in sustainable living solutions, particularly among millennial parents who were willing to pay premium prices for products that aligned with their values while providing practical benefits. SustainTech's positioning at the intersection of environmental consciousness and family technology placed us perfectly to capitalize on these demographic trends. The timing of Michael's outreach had been carefully planned to coincide with Austin Ventures' quarterly investment committee meeting, where partner recommendations were evaluated and funding decisions were made. His confidence in SustainTech's potential had been strong enough to initiate preliminary discussions before receiving formal committee approval, indicating his personal commitment to facilitating our partnership. The due diligence materials that I'd unknowingly provided through various startup showcase platforms and pitch competitions had given Michael comprehensive insights into SustainTech's operations, financial projections, and growth strategy long before our first conversation. The consistency and professionalism of these materials had impressed him, particularly given the resource constraints under which they'd been prepared. Emma's technical documentation and code quality had exceeded Michael's expectations when Austin Ventures' technical advisors had reviewed our platform's architecture and development practices. The scalability and security measures we'd implemented despite budget limitations demonstrated engineering competence that could support rapid user growth without requiring fundamental rebuilding of our core systems. The customer acquisition strategies that we'd developed organically through necessity had proven remarkably effective despite our inability to invest in paid marketing campaigns. The community-building approach that resource constraints had forced us to adopt had created stronger user loyalty and more sustainable growth than many venture-funded competitors had achieved through expensive advertising and promotional campaigns. Michael's phone call to Rebecca that Sunday morning had been intended to discuss a potential partnership between Austin Ventures and her law firm for providing legal services to portfolio companies. But the conversation had taken an unexpected turn when she'd mentioned her family connections and specifically referenced her future sister-in-law's struggling environmental app business. The coincidence was remarkable, but Michael's professional ethics required him to handle the situation carefully to avoid any appearance of impropriety or conflict of interest. Rebecca's description of SustainTech as an embarrassing hobby business had actually intrigued Michael, rather than discouraging his interest, since his personal experience with our platform directly contradicted her characterization of our company's value and potential. The disconnect between Rebecca's perception and his family's positive experience with SustainTech had prompted him to accelerate his timeline for reaching out about investment opportunities. The legal complexities of Michael's relationship with Rebecca through Austin Ventures' potential partnership with her firm required careful navigation to ensure that personal connections didn't compromise the integrity of investment decisions or create conflicts of interest. Austin Ventures' compliance procedures included provisions for managing such situations, allowing Michael to proceed with SustainTech discussions while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. Jennifer Chen's reaction to learning about the family connection between Rebecca and SustainTech's founder had been one of genuine surprise and concern, since Rebecca's attitude toward environmental issues and technology startups hadn't suggested someone who would be supportive of a family member's sustainability-focused business venture. The contrast between Rebecca's professional success and her apparent lack of understanding about SustainTech's value had struck Jennifer as unfortunate and potentially damaging to family relationships. The investment proposal that Michael was prepared to present to me included not just financial capital, but strategic guidance for navigating the challenges of rapid scaling while maintaining SustainTech's mission-driven culture and user-focused approach. Austin Ventures' portfolio included several companies that had successfully balanced growth objectives with social impact goals, providing relevant experience for supporting our development. The timing of Michael's call during our family brunch would prove to be both dramatically perfect and genuinely coincidental, creating a moment of vindication that no amount of planning could have orchestrated more effectively. The transformation from family disappointment to investment success story would happen in real time, witnessed by the very people who'd questioned my entrepreneurial judgment and financial competence. Up next, you've got two more standout stories, right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.